Huma, Yahweh, Weafutsu Oyeveka, Mianusa Misaneka Mifaneka. Arise of you, O Yahweh. Let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee.
Shalom everyone, and welcome to Into All Truth. May the Ruach HaKodesh lead you into all truth and show you things to come. In the name of Yahusha. Family, thank you for donations, and please pick up Into All Truth, the Moed Appointed Times Calendar, or Chaya Eat Life Fast to keep the Hebraic lifestyle. May Yah bless the hearers, and may the Ruach HaKodesh lead you into all truth and show you things to come. In the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. So we're going to get a clear picture of who the diaspora of YAHSHAREL is and who the Chaldeans are and the Canaanites and Edomites and so on. We're going to go into all of that, but the thing I want to warn you, YAHSHAREL, and anyone joining the house of YAHSHAREL of those nations, is do not let them rob you of your inheritance. Babylon is fallen. All right, and so that's what this is all about, for everyone to get an idea of who everyone is, so that everyone can get free, get their land, and get out of Babylon. Because as for anyone who remains and thinks this is the promised land, judgment. Glory of the excellency of the Chaldeans, and Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency shall be as when Yahuwah overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. But wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And the wild beasts of the islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant places. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. So this is Amorite Ka. This is the Amorites mixed in with the Chaldeans and with Esau, Edom, and the Moabites, with all the Canaanites who are the white people in America, as well as groups like the Somalians, etc. There's black and white Canaanites between Africa. Watch my other videos, but anyway, this land will be judged, and it will be vacant. So you really seriously want to consider wanting to have a piece of it, because it's going to be destroyed, and we see that war is coming. All right, part 2 of Glory of the Excellency of the Chaldeans. We're going to deal a lot with Esau, Edom, to see the geographical connections between Shem in South America and Africa, rivers, names of places. Use scripture to locate the Assyrians, documents that list Moabites and more. So I am doing this video in aid of trying to bring one nation under a group, as this video, this album basically is trying to do from Funkadelic. And so you're going to see, as usual, from reverse Pangea, that it is not either we're from this side or that side, Africa, but it's both and. So let's get into it. The glory of the excellency of the Shemitic Chaldeans, who chose to remain Egyptian, and the 10 tribes in the United States, who never, ever in the history of the Northern Kingdom ever followed the law of Torah and worshiped Yahuwah. Yes, they are definitely bad. They're definitely a bad un. We're always seeing them portraying themselves in feathers as these Indians and as Egypt. They say they're Moors. They say they're the Indians. They say they're Khan. They say they're all of these things. These are them in Iran and Iraq. Well, here is Nimrod. And Nimrod, as you will remember, had all of the Shemites in his kingdom, and he was in their land. And even Esau slayed Nimrod and so obtained his kingdom. So Esau is now associated with the leopard and all of the things that the Chaldeans are associated with, because Esau is also a Shemite. So we're going to look at Esau and how his deal with the devil went bad in Africa, in Europe, amongst the Chaldeans in America, and the beginning of his power amongst the Europeans with chaos magic. The high priest of hell, that is Esau, Edom. And so when we hear our Shemitic brothers and indigenous, quote, Black Americans saying these things, in truth, they are right. Because what did Yah say to Abraham? He said to leave your father's house. And so he went down to the land of Canaan. Down is up because water flows north to the indrawing sea from the fresh waters of the southern four rivers, and headed towards the land of Canaan. And it was called that because the Canaanites had stolen it. But he headed towards what we call Africa today and Egypt, because the land of Shem is to the south thereof. So this was the face of Asia, Persia, Pan-Asia, right? The face of Asia, otherwise known as the third Ethiopia, all right? So this is where the Chaldeans were in the south. Look up there, Ham's land, covering all of America as Edom edges in from Europe in the east. Africa was Ham's land in the west. Japheth, or Japheth, was in the north. And of course, Shem got the east and the south. That is his allotment. So if we look at this ancient compass, what it does is it shows very clearly this division. The land of Shem, the land of Israel, was the Orient. Why? Because it's at the navel center of the earth around which everything else is oriented. When Marcus Garvey was asked whether he was African or Jamaican, he replied, I will not give up a continent for an island. So I'm just going to go into a little bit of Joseph in Egypt to remind you of the presence of the Maya, the descendants of Israel in that region when the 12 tribes were there and when he was there, just to get you situated. And then we're going to move back into the Shemitic peoples and their own special mixed multitude. So when you see the name Tutankhamun, remember there's a Ghana in South America as well. So what was Joseph and the people of Israel called when they were in the land of Egypt? So we've gone into this book before. Queen Mu, which displays this wall relief that shows the map of the earth, the known earth at that time, and identifies the Israelites. There is a root and branch of Jesse. So another word for water in Hebrew is Mayim. 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 In the symbolism of the blue map that I showed you originally in the first image, these people are the tree planted by the water, in the land of the seven streams. And now they've come to Egypt, the Mayim, in the watery land and the sea. They've come via the watery land and the sea, the Mayim. And the Shemayim, the waters above of the heavens. They are of the waters above of the heavens. One of the things that scripture says is that Yah says his people are called by his name. And so in Psalm 68, his name is stated very clearly. Sing unto Yahuwah, sing praises to his name, extol him that rideth upon the heavens by his name. Yah. Rejoice before. Okay, so Yah's people are called by his name. So the Maya are called by his name. Yah. Now, Yakskin, Yaks is, so when you're talking about Jacob, that was his name before Yah called him Israel, it was Jacob, so it would be Jacob. Or Yatsik. Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. So another, even Russian name for Jacob or Jack is Yatzik. So these are Yatzik's kin, because Isaac went to Egypt as well. So they were, oh, you guys are Jacob's, you're Isaac's kin. Isaac's kin, okay? Jacob's or Isaac's kin. Ephraim was what? One of the sons of Joseph, and he ruled over the northern kingdom. So you're talking about Iberia. Now, we're going to go more into the Northern Kingdom in our second part of the series. But right now we're focusing on geography and the land. Remember, Esau is partly responsible for the Esarian captivity, the Assyrian captivity, the Sahara, the Isara desert, right? Prester John. So during the Assyrian captivity, this Prester took Israel over to North America. Now they went in all four directions all over the earth, but this is one of the principal captivities. The Assyrian captivity led the 10 tribes to Eretz Azarath, which is on this national Canadian map. Happy Montezuma said of Cortez, the Spanish conqueror of Mexico, right? We know, said the unhappy monarch in his first interview with the Spanish general, by our books that myself and those who inhabit this country are not natives, but strangers who came from a great distance. So they're saying we're not really from this land, we're really the 10 tribes who came over here, and we call ourselves the Mayas because that's what our relative Joseph called himself when he came here. So this was the beginning of the punishment of the 10 tribes of Israel for remaining in the land of Egypt. Remember, I showed you all those scriptures. Don't go down to Mitzrayim. Don't go down, Yah says a million times in scripture. Don't. What do? They go, of course. So like I said, there's an Assyria and a Ghana over in South America. So let's find out more about these Assyrian Chaldeans, who their tribal names might be. There is a land called Suriname, that is related to the word cayenne, Cheyenne, right? Cayenne pepper colored, maroon colored in South America. And they even have a Cameroon, and this is not solely because of the slave trade, but it's also because South America was attached to Africa. Kings 17 and 24, we see the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cutha and from Awa and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim or Sepharam, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel, and they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. So what we're talking about is now this is over on the continent of Africa. So this is what the Assyrian kings did. They displaced and replaced people. So this is why in Africa you have Egyptians, right? You have Hamites. And in the west, in the land of Ham, where the biggest pyramids in the world are, in the Grand Canyon, 7,000 feet high, this is why you have the Israelites over there. And so let's take a look at some of these names. Let's take a look at some of these names. Kutha. So this is similar to Chata. We've been talking about, and it looks like Cush, Kuth, Cushing. Okay? It says of foreign origin. Okay? Now you might think that this is, and it's only ever mentioned once, but it's very similar to Chata. And remember, or Kutha, Chata. So then that became Choctaw, Kutha. All right? So this is a possibility. This is just a theory right now. It could evolve and expand with more information. So I want you, family, to consider that. So this is how the switch came along, okay? Because it says they brought men from Babylon. Where is Babylon? Babel. That is, remember, Babylon is usually the land of Ham. And it's usually when the Assyrians or Shemites have been sold out to that confusion by mixing. And so when we go to India and such, which is also the land of Shem, we see a Babylonia near the Euphrates, which the Ganges could be considered the Euphrates to some, right? It's the longest river. Or the Danube River, which then dumps out just east of Arabia. Okay, so that's the Erythraean Sea, Erythraean Euphrates River. The words are similar, so we could also say that. just on the eastern edge there, okay? But Babylonia is also, Babylon proper is always Egypt proper. All right, so just consider it and take this into account in terms of us accounting for the Shemites. All right, and who are the Sepharvaim? Sepharvaim. All right, 2 Sepharas, a city in Syria conquered by the king of Assyria. Mosaib on the Euphrates above Babylon. So Sepharim. All right, so Sephardic. So again, Assyrians or potentially Edomites, right? Modern Mosaib. All right, so who are some of these people? And it says a foreign derivation. So we could be looking once again at the Shemites because there's a tie-in, right, with these Sephars refers to the Sephar, the word, those who have the word, but these would be men of the word of ancient times. So that would often be what? The Shemites, okay? This is what my theory here. Now, Shamron. So Shemron, Samaria, all right? And so they were dispossessed by these nations. What? Awa is another. What do they call their god in Egypt? Awa. Awa. Right? You always hear them saying that on certain channels, historical channels. Okay? And so who is it saying that these people are? Assyrians, from which colonies were brought. So it doesn't really go much into it, but it says here a city of Phoenicia. And who are the Phoenicians? Well, these were the Edomites, mixing with all these other nations like the Horites and so on, and the Moabites. They began to be very mixed. All right? And so they're worshiping the serpent, Awa, right? And so let's go into the root word. Distortion, ruin. And what do they always say? What do the Edomites always say? We will rebuild the destroyed places. These are just indicators. All right, and so Hamath. So this is another reference to Edom. This is another reference. The fortress of Hamath will be destroyed. Okay, a place in Syria. So again, this is these Assyrians, but it's also a tie-in to the Edomites. All right, so they came in and displaced Israel. They came in and displaced the 10 tribes in the Assyrian captivity. But I just wanted to tie this back to Chief Warhorse and the potential of Kutta, right? Chata, and Awa being this serpent spirit, Quetzalcoatl, right? So it's tying back to Egypt.
I believe that Native Americans, Indigenous Native Americans, the copper-colored ones, and African Americans, and Israelites alike, all go back to African, so-called, African lineage and ancestry, because whether or not the Native Americans were in America before we came over on the ships, we all still go back to Adam and Eve, and those two people originated on the continent of Africa at Kebulan, whichever, whatever you want to use. And so I also want to point out some of her tribal wear. And if you notice that she said that she comes from a long line of royal tribal Native American chiefs. And I wanted to point out the correlation between, if you look at what she has here, I'm going to show you another picture, but if you look at what she has here around her neck, it's very similar to, let me just show it now. This is a full picture of her. It's the same woman you were just listening to, Shatta Indian, and you can see here she has the beaded neck dress with the beaded fringes. Now, here's another picture of it. I'm trying to go as quickly as I can to get this in 10 minutes. Beautiful hair, just like my mother's before my mom cut hers. Anyway, beautiful hair. And you can still see the same neck dress and well, that's horsetail. I thought it was fringes, but it looks like horsehair. But anyway, if you look at her beaded dress, you can see the same thing here with the Ebos. Now, this is a royal, this is a men's groom garment, and I've seen it also applied to royalty with Ebos, but it's the exact same thing, the exact same style, exact same style. Here's another one. This one actually says chieftaincy. So this is what Igbo chiefs would wear. Same exact thing that she has on. The fringes are a little different. The beadwork is a little bit more different colors, but it's the exact same concept. You can see the same similar shape. Now, some of them have them open and some of them have them connected. Another thing I want to show is the hosa. They have the exact same thing. Now, in this picture, it's kind of hard to see it right here, but I'm going to show you some other pictures where you can see that better. But you can see the same exact thing here, and the fringe is coming down here. I think she has one similar around her neck. There might be a necklace. You can see the same beaded around his neck with the fringes. Same thing, okay? Let me see if I can find another picture. This one here, this is a hosa, traditional wedding, a groom. Same exact concept. Beaded around the neck, beaded, and then it has the fringes, just like the Native American woman, just like the Igbo tribe people that I was going to show you. Same thing here. Well, similar thing here that Nelson Mandela has on. He was of the Hosa tribe as well. And then,
because I never knew what a Moor was in my life, never heard it in my village. And as I began to speak and do talk shows and stuff, I heard people coming at me with, well, are you a Moor? Are you a Moor? I'm not a Moor. Moor just means black. I am not the Moor that people talk about that comes from the European country and came here like the Portugal people came here to destroy the black Indians that was already here, or should I say the black indigenous. And, you know, that's a highly controversial thing that I'm talking about, but people who classify themselves as Moors need to realize why did the Spanish bring the Moorish people or the black people or the Portugal people to this area? And as you go back to look, it's self-explanatory within their records. They brought them here with them. They were black Europeans seeking the same thing that the white Europeans were seeking, and that was a new land, a new place, and new riches.
So Arphaxad was the father of the Chaldeans, okay? And so when you're talking about the Chaldeans, you're talking about the people who are in the west, as well as some of them are in the east. But right now we're talking about South and Central America. And so I want you to understand who these people are. Because they are actually another mixed multitude, and they love to discuss themselves as a mixed multitude, as you will see how their government works here. We're going to look at the Targum, and of course we're looking at the Septuagint as well here. At the time that Israel was going into their land, the first person they had to deal with Amalek. That's Amalek, so that's a combination of the Horites, who have no genealogy, Esau, Edom, and the Hittites, okay? And so they routed Amalek and the Amorites. Those were the first to go to war against Israel when they returned from Egypt. And next they had to deal with Moab. Okay, so Moab. And so when it talks about Ruth being a Moabite from the land of Moab, this is the time in the Bible in Numbers when they took them over. And so Ruth was not a Moabite, she was a Reubenite, but that's the sidebar. So anyway, here we go. This is the description from the Targum of how these people operated. They were a combination, a confederate of a group of people. And they said to the elders of Midian, for the people had been won, and the kingdom won unto that day. Now will this congregation consume all that is about them, as the ox eateth up the grass of the field. And Balak bar Zippor, a Midianite, so they're calling him a Midianite, okay, was the king of Moab at the time. Why are they calling him a Midianite? Because Midian is mixed in a confederacy with them, okay? Because you're going to see. Without a Midianite being such at another time, for so was the tradition among them to have kings from this people, so for example, the Midianites, rule over them. Why did they do this? This is the same that is said of Esau, Edom. he and his brothers also will not rule over each other because they don't trust each other. So they let a king of Japheth rule over them. So this is part of how they conducted themselves at this time, okay? To have kings from this people, and from that, by turns, rule over them. And he sent unto Laban the Aramite, so he's Aram, that's a Shemite, who was Balaam, a Shemite, okay? So they're saying now part of the house of Laban was Balaam, who was a Shemite. This is how they try to confuse the scripture. Balaam was an Edomite, all right? But the Edomites were descendants of Aram. So this is not lying, it's just confusing the truth, all right? So, and the Edomites, like I said, would have other nations rule over them or rule with them or form confederacies. This is where we get the Confederate Army. They were confederate against the children of Israel in America, okay? So it says, he sent unto Laban the Amorite, who was Balaam, of the house of Laban, the son of Beor. Well, Laban doesn't have a son named Beor. Esau, Edom does. And so we look at Balaam here. It says, son of Beor, a non-Israelite diviner, for his effectiveness enlisted by Balak, king of the Moab, to pronounce curses on the Israelites, okay? And so we also see in Numbers 22, it says, Balaam, son of Beor in Pethor. So he is a descendant of Esau, Edom. And so this is why it says, my people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, plotted against you, how Balaam, son of Beor, this is another reference, right? So we have two of them here, in 24:25, responded to him from Shittim to Gilgal, and you will recognize the gracious acts of Yahuwah. So those are two references to him being son of Beor, who was one of the sons of Esau, Edom. But you see how they mix in with these other nations and they form confederacies. It came to pass in the 84th year, that is the 50th year of the reign of Haddad, son of Bedad, king of Edom, right? Ben-Hadad, right? That Haddad assembled all the children of Esau and got his whole army in readiness, about 400,000 men, and directed his way to the land of Moab. And he went to fight with Moab and make them tributary to him. And the children of Moab heard this thing, and they were very much afraid. And so they sent to the children of Midian to assist them in fighting with Haddad, son of Bedad, king of Edom. Haddad came unto the land of Moab, and the children of Midian went out to meet him, and they placed themselves in battle array against him in the field of Moab. And Haddad fought with Moab, and there fell the children of Moab and the children of Midian, many slain ones, about 200,000 men. And the battle was very severe upon Moab. When the children of Moab saw the battle was sore upon them, they weakened their hands, turned their backs, and left the children of Midian to carry on the battle. So this is, there are various Midianites, okay? And the children of Midian knew not the intentions of Moab, but they strengthened themselves in the battle and fought with Haddad and all his host, and Midian fell before him. And Haddad smote all Midian with a heavy smiting and slew him with the edge of the sword. He left none remaining of those who came to assist Midian. Okay? And it says, and then all the children of Midian had perished in the battle. The children of Moab have escaped, and Haddad made all Moab at that time tributary to him. And they came under his hand, and they gave a yearly tax as ordered. And Haddad turned back to his land. And then anyway, you find out that Midian heard their brothers were slain. Then they basically have to go to war with Esau, Edom, and are slain by Edom. But from then on, they have great enmity with Moab. So I believe it was at this time that Israel was captive to Egypt, or ruling in Egypt. It's usually a confederacy of the Assyrians, Edom, Moab, and sometimes Laban. Okay? So I just want, and the Canaanites always are the Horites. So Horites, Canaanites of the fallen angel seed, Moab, and Esau, Edom and the Assyrians. So about a confederacy of about 5 nations. And so what happens when Balaam goes to try to curse Israel as they enter into the land? Yah forces him to bless him. But during that time, according to the Targum, what he sees is that he sees the weakness of Israel, and this is why he's judged in the New Testament as being wicked in the book of Revelation, because he goes up to the high, see now, and looking here at the third paragraph, it says, at the time of the morning, Balak took Balaam and brought him up to a high place of the idol of Peor, and saw from thence the camp of Dan, which went at the rear of the people, and he discovered under the cloud of glory. And Balaam, as he looked upon them, knew that strange worship was among them, and he rejoiced in his head and said to Balak, build here 7 altars and prepare 7 bullocks. And Balak did as Balaam had said, and they offered a ram, etc. And then he says that after this, he does his offering. But the thing is that this is where he learns that Dan will be a serpent by the way. So when you're talking about the 10 tribes, so we just talked about 5 bad nations among the Shemites, oftentimes Dan is in with them. And also what is called to remembrance for Balaam here, who had tried to curse Israel at several different locations but couldn't, was he also was given a vision of them having done the golden calf worship. And so he was trying to find an opening or a way to curse them. But he was also able to communicate to the Edomites in the future and the other Confederate nations, was that Israel would have a tendency, especially through Dan as the gateway, to go and worship the Egyptian serpent gods, the feathers, all of these kinds of things. And so when we look here at the Moabites, these are the Moabites, and in our third part, we're going to go into the agreements that are being set up now, state by state, okay? Agreements being set up state by state in America for the Moabites and the Moroccans, basically, the Moors. So oftentimes, as we see with the Moabites here, the 10 tribes in these other nations, the Shemites, the Chaldeans, they're always wearing these eagle feathers because this is prophesied to be the defeat of Israel. Esau, Edom, and all of these people wearing these feathered headdresses will devour Israel, according to Enoch, according to many scriptures, which I'll quote later. But their vulnerability is that they want to do golden calf worship. They want to be in Egypt. They want to be in the pyramids. They want to worship Baal. They want to worship Awa, right? The serpent, Quetzalcoatl. They want to say they're Egypt. And so this is the weakness that Balaam discovers, and this is how Esau learns to overcome Israel. And so this is what we see among the Shemites in North America, the 10 tribes, etc. And so they will, the weaker ones will have this tendency to go right back to Egypt, to go to the feathers, to go to the serpent, all of this kinds of things. And we'll see it in my next episode because we're going to watch an interview with a number of them. And so we see Dan is among these Chaldeans, even the 10 tribes, and they end up being Montezuma in the happy Montezuma said of Cortez, the Spanish conqueror of Mexico, "We know," said the unhappy monarch in his first interview with the Spanish general, "by our books, prophecy, that myself and those who inhabit this country are not natives, but strangers who came from a great distance." Okay, so the 10 tribes knew this when they were being conquered. They knew where they were from. Now remember, the curse in the scripture is you will forget who you are. And so Montezuma was a YAHSHARELite, not a Shemite, because once you become YAHSHAREL, once you become Israel, that's your nation, not Shem any longer. But what happens to this confederacy? Well, Balaam literally speaks a prophecy over them that he is given by Yah, because Yah keeps putting his word in his mouth. but he's still unfaithful to Yah, no matter how much Yah tries to give him the word and prevent him from sinning. So he took up a parable of his prophecy and said, woe to them who are alive at the time when the word of Yahuwah shall be revealed, to give good reward to the righteous, and to take vengeance on the wicked, and to smite the nations and king, and bring these things upon them. And ships, sails armed for war, will come forthwith. Armies from Lombardia, so that's Italy, from the land of Italia, conjoined with legions that will come from Constantina, all right, and will afflict the Arthures. So Arthures means the Assyrians, or the the Assyrians, or the Ashurans, okay, Ashurans. But King Arthur, there's an association with the Shemites, right? And bring into captivity all the sons of Eber. Nevertheless, the end of these and of those is to fall by the hand of the king of Meshiha, and be brought to everlasting. This is what the Jerusalem Targum says. Woe to him who is alive when the word of Yahuwah set himself to give good reward to the just and take vengeance upon the wicked. And great hosts of Liburnia will come from the great city and conjoin with them many legions of the Romani to subjugate the Assyrian, or Ashurian. Okay, again, Ashur. And afflict all the children beyond the river. What? The rivers of Ethiopia, the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so that's over in South and Central and North America. So that is what happened to them. And now, of course, remember that the Moabites received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit West Africa. This is why it is said, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Okay, so Montezuma to Tripoli. Remember reverse Pangea, fam. Remember it. It helps you figure out a lot of stuff. So these are the Moorish redemption movements in the United States that are trying to redeem this land, the land of Canada and the United States, back to the Moors. And so, of course, you see they list Moabites, etc., in these documents.
So anyway, I wanted to share this really quickly because there's some things that I wanted to point out. First of all, I wanted to point out that Native Americans here first, again, as I've always said, the first ones here were dark colored, copper colored like her. And then also I want to point out the correlation, the simulation between African Americans and Native Americans, Indigenous Americans, and how we tie back to Africa. And you heard her say that I'm not saying that we're not from the same family back in time. She just wants to point out that her lineage of people were in the Americas long before the transatlantic slave trade began to happen. I don't perceive Native Americans as being non-Africans, and I'm using African loosely only because of the fact that I know that Africa was named after the explorer Leo Africanus, and so African was not necessarily a term that we gave ourselves. We called ourselves by our nationality, whether it be Israelite, whether it be Ethiopian, whether it be Egyptian, whatever. So I'm using the term African loosely.
I want you to really contemplate the clothing of the people in the Western world, the land of Shem, as the Assyrians or Chaldeans, and the Edomites, the 10 tribes, in light of these scriptures, Matthew 13 and 32. This is about the parable of the mustard seed, which indeed it grows into a big bush here, okay? Which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when it grows, it is the greatest among the herbs, and becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof. Okay, now Israel is always described, and so then there's another prophecy in Daniel 4 and 10, and it says, thus were the visions of mine head in my bed, and I saw, behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great, and it grew strong, and it reached to heaven. I'm just skimming along here. And the height thereof reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of the earth, and the leaves thereof were fair, and fruit thereof much. Okay? And it was meat for all, and the beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the air dwelt in the boughs thereof. Sounds like the mustard tree, right? Just almost exactly the same. And look, so there's a feathered serpent. He has feathers like a bird, right? And I saw the vision in my head upon my bed. Behold, a watcher, an unholy one, come down from heaven. And he cried aloud and said thus, hew down the tree and cut off his branches, and shake off his leaves, and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Then in Enoch, we have probably like a 5 or 10 page parable all about the lambs being Israel and these beasts of the field and fowls of the air devouring them, in particular eagles and vultures and ravens. And so it says, I'll just read to the last of it here, but you can go and look at it in Enoch yourself. And notwithstanding those eagles and vultures and ravens and kites still kept tearing the sheep and swooping down upon them and devouring them, and still the sheep remained silent. But the rams lamented and cried out. Okay, so then later Yahusha comes and rescues Israel. So what I'm trying to show you here, and you can go and find these scriptures on your own, is that these nations who are confederate against Israel, with Esau, Edom leading them, are always represented by these evil predatory birds. And the last one is in Luke 17:37. It says, where the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered. And we know the prophecy of Ezekiel where it says, dry bones, prophesy unto these dry bones, and let breath come into them, because this is the carcass that has been devoured by the eagles. And so when we see all these feathers and all of this eagle imagery, we can recognize that these are part of the Confederacy. There's a chocolate Confederacy and a vanilla Confederacy, okay?
Stolen identity, a lock without a key.
So I'm going to pause right here because we need to get into the whole transatlantic slave trade from Europe and discuss the conflict between Esau and Jacob and stolen identities, identity switches, the Count of Monte Cristo situation. True Hebrew Israelites. Stolen identity, a lock without a key, in early Christianity. And the story of Esau and Jacob is especially important. Esau and Jacob were twins born in the belly of their mother Rebekah. Isaac sought to bless Esau, but Yahuwah had already promised Rebekah that Jacob would have the kingdom in the womb. And Esau, he said, I hated. But Esau lost even the blessing of his father. He asked if there was no more blessing for him, and so Isaac told him that he would live by the sword and off the dew of heaven and the fat of the earth once he got the advantage over his brother Jacob. And he would also have to fight against Japheth, the Gentile, who was promised to dwell in the tents of Shem during the exile of YAHSHAREL from their land. Jacob would become the seed of the promise, the father of the kings and priests of the earth to come through much struggle and hardship and through faith in the delivering hand of Yahuwah, while Esau would become his greatest enemy and cause the end of the world. The Witcher Blood Origin series shows the moment when Edom took power to rule the earth, seeking chaos magic by sacrificing his own Canaanite or Horite children.
Obadiah, thus saith Yahuwah against Edom, we have heard a rumor from Yahuwah, an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise, let us rise up against her to battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art utterly despised. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee. Thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and make thy nest among the stars, hence will I bring thee down, saith Yahuwah. Came thieves to thee, or robbers by night? How wast thou brought to silence? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? So if thieves came and robbed anyone, wouldn't they steal till they had enough? This is what he's saying.
But it wasn't enough. He wanted to rule the Gentiles and the Canaanites, who with him had taken the world from YAHSHAREL, Israel. Because Esau was the end of the world, according to Yah, and Jacob the beginning of the one that would follow. With his strategy and spiritual power bestowed by Isaac, he knew that when he got the advantage, he would live by the sword and off the dew of heaven and fat of the earth. This is Lady Liberty, Queen of Heaven, Diana Isis, Kemet Canaan.
How are the things of Esau sought out, and his treasures searched? All the men of thy confederacy have driven thee to thy borders. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee, and they that ate thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. Shall not I in that day, saith Yahuwah, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding from the mount of Esau? And thy strong man, O Teman, Haman shall be afraid, because every one of the mount of Esau shall be cut off by slaughter. For thy cruel
Eventually, Esau sacrifices his own wife to keep his power over the Gentiles and heathens. Though Isaac had blessed him to live by the sword. So to keep his stronghold among the Gentiles, he married with Ashkenaz, as Japheth was prophesied to dwell in the tents of Shem. And once he got the advantage over his brother, he caused Jacob to submit to the same wicked witchcraft he himself had submitted to.
Não te devia nada. E existe o bem sem o mal? Ou morte sem vida? O que você quer de mim, hein? Reverência. Se ajoelhe aos meus pés. Não vou ajoelhar, que eu não sou escravo seu nem de ninguém. que você estava fazendo naquele dia? Tava lá do lado dele, cuidando. Vaidoso, orgulhoso. Vamos, besouro. Acorda.
The Orishas.
Acorda.
He also allied himself with the Shemites in South America. So here's a little wake-up call if you don't believe in reverse Pangea. Check out Brazil on both sides of the land of Shem. And check out the lion in Brazil, which is the third Ethiopia. And here's the lion. And here's the second Ethiopia in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, this is a lion, a giant lion, just like the one you see in Brazil. Again, in the second Ethiopia. So this is the kingdom of the lion, stretching all the way from India, the first Ethiopia, through to the second Ethiopia in Africa, across the water to the third Ethiopia in Brazil. Also in the range of the third Ethiopia and Egypt, we have a third lion. No, it's not a sphinx. Normally we see these very grand images of the Sphinx seemingly portraying these perfect kind of proportions. However, when we actually take a look at it, the proportions aren't that great. The Sphinx is far too out of proportion. The head's way smaller than the body. And basically, the people who built the pyramids would probably never make such an error in proportion. So this explains why there is this riddle. Not only that, but because the head is more exposed and the body less exposed, the body would be more eroded. However, the head looks newer and smoother, and being more exposed, like I just said, it should look more worn. So there are various people who've looked at this question and come up with other solutions. In this Smithsonian documentary, Carl Reed says that Pharaoh Khafra reigned about 2500 BC and that this was found inside the pyramid on the wall. Beside his name was this image of this lion, and he says that this is a female lion. Of course, this female lion seems to have a lot of girth around her neck, but nevertheless, that's the explanation given. He basically superimposed the female lion over this image of the Sphinx, or the so-called Sphinx. It must have been a female lion. However, it would more likely be a male lion, because when we look at this other Sphinx, which looks more like a black woman, we see again the image of a woman's face built into the head of a lion. But again, you look at the size of the mane of this lion, and you see that it is actually a male lion due to the lion's mane. And Sierra Leone also has a mountain, has Lion's Mountain in Sierra Leone. So you've got Sierra Leone and you've got Liberia on the coast, right? You have Morocco up here. Morocco, and it lines up with another Morocco. Maracaibo. So these are all these correlations. You have, I keep going over it, you have the Gihon and Guyana. You have Nicaragua. And a lot of people from Maracaibo went and emigrated back to Sierra Leone. There are a lot of Maracaibo immigrants in Sierra Leone. So I keep showing you biblical and old dictionary references for the term Moor. It was actually used by the Canaanites and the fallen when they were in the land of Canaan, and then, of course, because they were the false light, and then Ur, the Chaldeans, used it without the M on it. The Israelites also used Moor with the M on it when they were in the land. More is a teacher of Torah. And then the Ishmaelites and the Edomites have also used it historically. Please watch my Negro to Blanco series, where we see that Morocco here in 1986 was called Issaria. All right, so Issaria rules the Moabites, the Horites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Shemites, even to this day. So this is Issaria.nu. That's where I got all this information from. So it goes into some of this history. And remember, I told you the Phoenicians and the Sidonians were Issarians and likely Ishmaelites, Sudanese, okay? And so we remember that even by 1100 BC, so 1150, or I guess around 1050 BC is around the time that Solomon's kingdom was set up. So the northern kingdom was already in their lands. And as I said before, I believe that the northern kingdom was actually Western Britain, because the borders of the land of Abraham were simply the Egyptian Sea. So the Egyptian waters, which is basically the Atlantic or the Ethiopic Ocean, right? And then the other border on the east was the Euphrates. There was no northern or southern border. So I believe the northern kingdom was North Africa and Western Europe. And there's a lot of conversation about them having seafaring people. So this site, Issaria, timeline is a great timeline to consult. So it says the Phony Asians set up Morocco around here. And these were Berber tribes fishing in Mogador Bay in the Morocco area. So this is a long time ago. That's almost 3,100 years ago. And it says even 2,000 or more. Now they go into 10,000. I believe in a biblical timeline. So it could have been even before that, even 2,000 years, or at least, 1,500 BC. Okay, but we know 1,100 BC, the 10 tribes would have been in place in these regions. And we know that when Judah actually went to Egypt, he secured the gates of Gibraltar. So he passed through this area to go to Egypt, and he secured these gates. When we talk about, the Masons and Solomon and all that kind of stuff, Hiram Abiff and Solomon knew a secret password to open these gates of Gibraltar. And these are the two-leaved gates that Cyrus is given to open and to access the promised land when the Gentiles and other nations are given the kingdom of Israel. So these are these two-leaved gates. And so this land is a northern kingdom. So it says the Phoenicians set up their trading posts. Now remember that Jonah has to warn Nineveh and all that kind of stuff, and he gets in the ships of Tarshish and all that kind of thing. So the northern kingdom were seafaring people. So were the people of Tarshish. Okay, so they had relationships, and they all tie into what? Tyre, the prince of Tyre. And the prince of Tyre ties into Esau, Edom, and the Phoenicians. So even back to 1100 and earlier, the Mauritanians were here, and you know, you're going to be the 10 tribes who watch my channel, and I really appreciate you being here, you guys. Remember, the identity of Israel is constantly being hijacked and stolen. Constantly. And so you're going to learn more about the 10 tribes here. So the Phoenicians had their settlement here, and then the Numidians, but remember, so remember, it says the Numidians would rule over the Moabites, right? Because they would switch up their kings. And as I said in the book of Jasher, Esau, Edom overcomes the Moabites. It says Juba II established a Tyrian purple factory processing morex and shells found in this area. Now Atlantis would have been to the west here. And it talks about them. So it wasn't there where they so-called Israel today. This is where the ships were going back and forth to the Americas from here. And the ships of Tyre, they were going up to Britain and over around to Yavan, and they were distributing goods all over the world, the ships of Tyre. And so were the ships of Israel, the northern kingdom, because they were seafaring people. Okay, so here's the timeline and some of the maps. And so this is a great site to go to get a sense of the timelines. And so you have the Arab invasion in the 700s. Remember, we talked about Tariq in the last video, Ibn Ziyad. And we talked about Masa Musa, who was an African king. So that's basically the Hebrews in Western Africa. And you see Idris, the Arabs, invading in that area. They're serving the Arabs, force-converted Israelites in the 700s, invading that area, and them invading into Europe, into the 10 tribes land, which had been invaded, what? By the Gentiles, which we talked about in the last video. And who's Idris Elba? The Idrisids. Okay, so these are likely the Ishmaelites, because remember, the order is the Midianites take Joseph captive after he's sold by his brothers. Then the Ishmaelites pick him up and take him to Egypt. Then in Egypt, he is enslaved. And then the Pharaoh arises who does not know Joseph. In other words, doesn't have a good relationship with him. And those lines of pharaohs and all of those priests are related to Esau, Edom, and the Gentiles, and they keep him captive. They keep Israel captive. So that's the pattern over and over again. So this is a good reference. Look, Traveler Drake. Who's Drake? Drake is Esau, right? We know who the rapper Drake is. He's Esau. All right, so here's the timeline here again. Remember, I showed it in the last video. So the Assyrian captivity is 700 to 600 BC. And so that's some of the 10 tribes go east up into Eastern Europe, into the Mongolia lands, and others go up to Britain, and then they head west to North America. This is the evolution of Mauritania. So who are the Moors? Remember, when we're talking about the Moors, we're always discussing this identity that everybody wants, right? And so who are the true Moors? The true Moors above all other Moors? Well, when we look it up, Morashti, and in that day, Yahuwah came to Micah the Morashite in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Yehudah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Micah the Morashite prophesied in the days of Hezekiah, king of Judah, and spake to all the people of Judah, saying, Thus saith Yahuwah of hosts, Zion shall be plowed like a field, and Jerusalem shall be in heaps, and the mountain of the house as high places of a forest. So this is the destruction of the northern kingdom and all of Israel eventually. But who is Micah the Morashite? Well, Micah the Morashite is of the northern kingdom. He's a prophet of the 10 tribes. He's a Morashite. You guys may not like it, but what's the story? The story is that Abraham, see, and read this as I'm talking about it. Inhabitant of Moresheth, prophet Micah. So Abraham had Ishmael first. Ishmael coveted the firstborn son position. All right? He had 6 sons after having Isaac, who also coveted the firstborn son position. So what happened when Israel went into captivity? They were sold. Joseph went into captivity. He was sold by his brothers, right? Sold by his brothers. The Midianites pick him up. Who are the Midianites? One of the 6 sons of Keturah. They also coveted the identity of Isaac and Israel. So when Israel is in captivity in Egypt, who's dwelling at Mount Sinai where the temple is built? The Midianites. Why? Because they wanted that identity. So did Ishmael. So did Esau, who sold his birthright. So it's always a story of Israel originating an identity and then the other ones co-opting it. All right? So here are all Mordecai with the root Mor. He was a Benjaminite, the uncle of Esther. Moreh is a teacher of law. Moreshgath is a part of the 10 tribe lands. Moriah is the mountain of the temple. Hill of the teacher. So I say it on my opening. Hill of the teacher. Resh is the word for head. Resh means head or belonging to. Micah was a Morashite. Ite means descendant of the Moors. It also means a prophet or teacher of the law. So somebody stole your identity and you're rejecting it because the person who stole it has associated it with a bunch of negative things, including your enslavement and captivity, right? Maroon can be copper colored. The Maroons were on the islands of Jamaica, right? On the islands of Jamaica, they hid in the mountains as they are wont to do. Moriah, Moray, people of the mountain land. The Maroons hid in the mountains. Moriah means people chosen by Yahuwah, seen of Yah. That's what it means. Name of a hill where Solomon built the temple. Land of Moriah, region that is in the mountains. District of Moriah. Chosen by Yahuwah. The yod of union. That's the right hand. All right? And or, it has the word or in it, meaning light or gold. So this is the true meaning of more. So don't be giving it away or smacking the people who stole it from you and saying it's useless. Okay, that's why, you know, some people will talk about the Book of Mormon. Now it's corrupted, I'm sure. I haven't read it. But like, you know, some of the outside books, they do get a bit corrupted. They're mixing truth with a lie because Esau got his grubby hands on them. Like some of these other books. So they have to be reconciled with Scripture. But I'm just showing this to you to show you oftentimes it's referring to the northern kingdom, the Moors. What does England have? A lot of Moors. Where's the Northern Kingdom? Britain, Spain. In the last video, Tariq and Mansa Musa fought over what? The Table of Solomon that was hidden in the Northern Kingdom. So don't be so quick to give it to the Ishmaelites. They coveted it. They coveted it and thief it from you. Them take it and gone, and you think it belongs to them, but it's not. It's your name. Okay? And the place of Shechem, the plain of Moreh, the land of who? Manasseh. Who's included in the 144,000? Manasseh. That's where the plain of Moreh is. Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there he built an altar unto Yahuwah, who appeared to him in Genesis 2:6-27. This is a promise to Abraham. This is the land of Shechem. Now, don't believe this map on the right. This is where Israel agreed to be cursed or blessed, determined by whether or not they could keep the law. Right? So don't give up on Moreh. Moreh is a teacher of the law. Okay, we're going by the word. That's the ultimate measure.
The Seminole Wars, also known as the Florida Wars, were a series of 3 military conflicts between the United States and the Seminoles that took place in Florida between about 1816 and 1858. The Seminoles are an American Indian nation which coalesced in northern Florida during the early 1700s, when the territory was still a Spanish colonial possession. Tensions grew between the Seminoles and settlers in the newly independent United States in the early 1800s, mainly because enslaved people regularly fled from Georgia into Spanish Florida, prompting Slavic owners to conduct slave raids across the border. A series of cross-border skirmishes escalated into the First Seminole War in 1817, when General Andrew Jackson led an incursion into the territory over Spanish objections. Jackson's forces destroyed several Seminole towns and briefly occupied Pensacola before withdrawing in 1818. The U.S. and Spain soon negotiated the transfer of the territory with the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819.
Or describes them as a Moor. The Moors come in under a Sundry Act, and the Sundry Act was the act that brought black people in that looked like the black people here, and the Sundry Act put in some specific guidelines so that the black people from there, if they came in and did anything for as killing or capturing or taking of possessions, that they would be protected by the Spanish law of the Act of the Sundry Act that protected them from being persecuted underneath the law of what they was using on the indigenous people in America.
Phyllis Thompson Pettit, whose Georgia-born parents were brought by the Cherokees over the trail. Johnson Thompson was Phyllis's brother, so 14,000 Cherokees and 1,600 slaves were herded to Oklahoma, some groups in winter, with about a quarter of the Indians and blacks dying along the way.
The Gullah slaves, the black Seminoles, the Gullahs, who escaped from slavery, and other Negro people fought together with escaped slaves to settle colonies in regions like southeastern Florida. But eventually the Seminoles were enslaved to the Creek Indians. Rapper Old Dirty Bastard, his grandmother was Shinnecock as well as his grandfather. Now be careful to notice the kind of clothing they're wearing again.
Great-grandfather was an Indian chief, Shinnecock, from the Shinnecock Reservation in Long Island, Riverhead. So that's where my mother met my father in Long Island. Dirty just carried his heritage to the limit, you know. We're Indians. I say, and they used to say, yeah, we Indians, we sold Manhattan. I said, well, listen, they sold Manhattan for trinkets. So you always said, well, we're going to try to get it back. I said, Rusty, please. You're not getting it back, so forget it.
The Indian that sold Manhattan to the white man, my grandfather.
I got two historic legacies in my family, on my grandmother's side and on my grandfather's side. So imagine these two people get together and have children. That's where we come from. That's where Dirty come from. That's where Ray Ray come from. That's where 12 come from. Shitty, Murray, all of down the line.
He was the first one that I ever heard, you know, go on the TV, national television, and say that the black man is God. You know, and that right there was on the Arsenio Hall show.
Yo, black man is God! Black man is God!
The government brainwash our people with the mind control theory. That's what they do. So to make sure our people like it, they keep playing that same song.
Indian. Really? I believe these are Seminoles, Shemites, and 10 tribes pushed into the north, right, by persecution in the south. Please go and watch my Prester John series because it talks about the Asian and then all of the Indian wars that mixed the Hamites, the Canaanites, Asian, Chinese, East Indian Hamites, Egyptians is what they are, into the Shemites, and in particular the Khan and the Horites, okay? So this was a time when the Huns, the Khan, Attila the Hun, right, took over the identity of the Shemitic people by invading into Ethiopia, all right, and stealing an Ethiopian queen from an Ethiopian king in a war there. And these Ethiopians were a combination of Esau, Edom, of the Medo-Persians, of the Midianites, and so on. And so they had, the Khan had this victory and entered into the royal bloodline this way, according to Jeremiah, which says he'll mix the seed of YAHSHAREL with the seed of man and beast, which is what the Khan were. Now the Khan had married in Timnah of the Horite of Mount Seir, had married Elon's, the offspring of Elon, who had married to Esau, which created James Elephantus Eliphaz. So Timnah married Eliphaz, and that's where you got this race from. And so now they're taking over the line of Israel. So remember, they conspired to hide the West for a whole season. There was a whole season where everything was being covered up, all the pyramids and everything, and the West was hidden according to Masonic books. And we also understand the cradle of the symbolism used in Masonry came from Tartaria, the far north of Russia, where the Europeans had been roped off. You rope off these peons, Europeans, okay? So this is where the dead things came up from out of the sea. This is where the mixed seed of Satan and all of his experiments and all of the defiled people came up from out of Tartary. And this is when, you know, like I showed you in that film, how Esau, Edom went into that witchcraft, went in among those nations. And so this is the season right before Columbus rediscovered America, when the 10 tribes and the Israelites were captive there, or about to be taken captive there, and the Indigenous Shemites were there, and Esau, Edom was this special king, Tiglath-Pileser, ruling in this far-away third Ethiopia, which was America, okay? So watch that in my Prester John series. Now, Benjamin Franklin could have been, you know, a white Gentile, or he could have been an Edomite with a name like Yemen, because Yemen is where Esau, Edom was from in Africa, okay? So his name's Benjamin, all right? So, but nonetheless, Benjamin Franklin's famous quote about the skin color of the people who were coming over from Europe, from Germany and Britain, right? And so it says, since the detachments of English from Britain sent to America will have their places at home so soon supplied and increased so largely here, why should the Palatine Boers, so Boers are likely Edom, Black Edom, be suffered to swarm into our settlements, and by herding together establish their languages
and manners of exclusion of ours. Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs more than they can acquire our complexion? Which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionately very small. All Africa is black or tawny, Asia chiefly tawny, America exclusive of the newcomers, wholly so. So, okay, there's the agreement. Those are the indigenous Shemites and 10 tribes. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally of what we call a swarthy complexion, as are the Germans also. So we see what the indigenous people of the world are brown. The Saxons only accepted, who with the English make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. Anglo-Saxons, English. I wish their numbers were increased. And while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by clearing America of woods and so making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of the inhabitants in Mars or Venus, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America? So these are coming over from Africa to America. Northern Europe is still Africa, where we have so fair an opportunity, by excluding all blacks and tawnies, of increasing the lovely white and red. But perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is natural to mankind. In 1860, there were 487,000 free Negroes in the United States, some of whom owned slaves. Wilson estimates that there were 6,230 Negro slave holders. So these are the black Edomites, right? Black Arabs, Moors. The tax returns of Charleston, SC, for 1860 showed the Negro slave holders with 390 slaves. The Negro slave holders, like white ones, fought to keep their chattels in the Civil War. Okay, so these are Edomites. And so where were they located? When the black Scottish political prisoners arrived in the 13 colonies, the government had already established the area by free black Scots. Okay, and this is the thing that happened to the black founding Scots. It's no accident that Lee Cummings in the Negro Question quotes the book of Isaiah. What it says from verse 12 before this verse 13 is, he said, thou shalt no more rejoice, O thou oppressed virgin daughter of Sidon, the Sidonians. Arise, pass over to Chittim, so North America's Chittim, and there also shalt thou have no rest. Behold, the land of the Chaldeans. This people was not, so this is the land of the Chaldeans, now the Assyrians, right? The Assyrians, till the Assyrians founded it for them that dwell in the wilderness. And they set up the towers thereof, and they raised up the palaces thereof, and he brought it to ruin. O howl, ye ships of Tarshish, for your strength is laid waste. So basically, this is the same thing that happened to the black founding Scots, picking up right here. They set up the government of the 13 colonies, and the whites took it over. So it was Esau and Jacob. Esau was enslaving Jacob, but it was indentured servitude according to Scripture, so anywhere from 7 to 49 years long according to Scripture. And so there were Jacobites and Edomites who set up the government, and they prospered for a while in the 13 colonies till the whites came and took it over. They set up the government of the 13 colonies and took it over. I have in my possession ships' manifests that give the description of the black Schwartz,
That's King James' descendants, the Schwartz, the Stuarts. And the Scots came in waves to Virginia, Georgia, Hampshire, Maryland, Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, England, Plymouth, New Jersey, Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. Second Jacobite rebellion took place in the year 1745, called the 45, under King George II, who was a very evil king. King George, Black German King of England, was the first king of England to legalize the enslavement of men. When the state of Georgia was given the first charter, slavery was illegal, but in 1751, King George II legalized slavery. They had taken the throne from the Stuart family, the King James, and sent the Scots to the colonies, including to the West Indies, right? And I just showed you that other sighting of them being sent in the 1500s as well to Florida. Here they're sent to Florida, indentured servants from Europe with black skin, and this is a black slave holder. Some were Edom and some were Jacob. Some actually earned their freedom of both sides because they were practicing indentured servitude according to scripture, between 7 and 49 years of indentured servitude according to scripture. The Moors were Spanish Muslim that converted to Catholicism only outwardly. They were called Moriscos. So these are the Ishmaelites, I believe, who were amongst the Edomites. And they became known as the Huguenots and later settled in South Carolina. And so these are some of the Moors that you see with the turbans on. So they're a mix of Abraham and Ham, obviously, Hagar's offspring.
One thing, when you say they, who are you talking about? It's the cabal. And does the cabal know any religion in your perspective?
It's like an octopus, a huge octopus. Really, the cabal is coming from Italy. I thought about the black nobility, that not many people know that the black nobility are above the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and people don't know it about the black nobility. This is suppressed. And above them, this is the major thing, Switzerland. Switzerland is the center of evil, octagon group, and there's a lot going on there.
The city where Satan dwells in. In Revelation chapter 2, verse 13, the Bible says, I know where you live, where Satan has his throne. Yet you remain true to my name. You did not renounce your faith in me, not even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city, where Satan lives. Well, if you look up the martyr of St. Antipas, you'll see that it was under the reign of Emperor Nero, in a city that is now known as Geneva. And if you're wondering what's in Geneva, you'll find the company CERN, whose main mission is to create the God particle, attempting to split the veil between the supernatural and natural realm, possibly opening a supernatural portal to the underworld.
Please watch my Hebrew World Wars video to find out more about what happened during the wars of 1812, etc., because it's very detailed about the West Indies and a little bit of Africa. Now, this is the thing with Esau, Edom, and the deal he made with the devil and the Canaanites, the children of the fallen. At some point, the deal went bad. We're going to go back in time, but really forward in time, into the empire of Benin, the Edomite tribe. Now, it is said that Dan was mixed in because Dan of the 12 tribes of Israel was a serpent, by the way. And of course, as I repeatedly tell you guys, the Black Panther is a melanated leopard. And Esau, Edom, inherited the kingdom of Egypt. So he is the melanated leopard. And this is why the scripture says, ask yourself, can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? Neither are you able to do good, you who are accustomed to doing evil. So this was really Esau's agenda. He could not change. I will scatter you like chaff by the desert wind. And that's what happened to Israel too. The scripture tells us that Esau, Edom could not change the color of his skin. Okay? For all of you who think Esau, Edom, like the camps run by Esau, Edom, and the Ish people, financed by them, like to tell you. Okay?
Did you know? The ancient Great Benin Empire. The Benin Kingdom was a flourishing ancient city situated in modern-day Nigeria. During pre-colonial era, Benin was one of the many highly developed cultures in Africa. This kingdom got its start up around 900 CE when Edo people settled in the tropical rainforest of West Africa. The walls of Benin City and its surrounding kingdom was the world's largest earthworks carried out prior to the mechanical era and was featured in the Guinness Book of World Records. Benin City was also one of the first cities to have a semblance of street lighting. Huge metal lamps, many feet high, were built and placed around the city, especially near the king's palace. Fueled by palm oil, their burning wicks were lit at night to provide illumination for traffic to and from the palace. When the Portuguese first visited the city in 1485, they were stunned to find this vast kingdom made of hundreds of interlocked cities and villages, calling it the Great City of Benin. History 365.
Edo of the Benin Empire are, of course, Edomites. And they were the ones who sold everyone into slavery. And so I found this on this blog spot. And let's read a bit of it here. So you see the etymology here. Edo, Edom, Idumea. Note that both Hebron, where Sarah lives, and Beersheba, where Keturah lived, are in Idumea. Adam's territory extended between the settlement of his two wives and was entirely in the region the Greeks called Idumea. Okay, so that's Esau, Edom's land. The Great Edo Empire of Benin. So here we get to the connection with Egypt. Edo monarchs demonstrate strong affinity with ancient Egyptian gods and pharaohs, with which they share identical authority, grandeur, and a great deal of reverence for from their subjects. Like the pharaohs, the Edo monarchs are god kings because they are god kings and God's sons. They are considered divine and worshipped by their subjects, who speak to them always in great reverence at a distance and on bended knee. Great ceremonies surrounded every action of the Edo king. The kings of Benin also adopt grand Osirian titles of the open eye. So you see, he's totally adopted. The kingdom of Benin totally adopted Egypt. Why? Because remember, I told you that Esau, Edom killed Nimrod, so he adopted the Egyptian kingdom represented by the leopard, right? Signifying omniscience and omnipotence. Edo monarchs, when they transit to the beyond, are like Egyptian pharaohs, set up in a state in a linked series of underground chambers surrounded with their paraphernalia of power. For their comfortable sojourn in the ethereal world. So Edo, Edomite, and Idoma and Idumea are related words. The Greeks called the inhabitants of this region the Idumeans. People with a what? A reddish skin. So ruddy, brick colored, okay? Reddish brown, right? Maroon. People with a reddish skin tone like the Igbo of Benin. The ancient name of Edo is Idu. Idu was a progenitor of the Edo or Edoma, hence the expression Idu, the father of Edoma. The royal lines of the Edo have been orally transmitted. So Idu begot 6 sons. Onawungeno, who begot the children of Igwulmale. Olanogwu, who begot the people of Igboju. Idum, who begot the people Adako. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this. Agabi, who begot the people Otukpo. Ehye, who begot the people of Olewu. Ebebi, hey baby, hey, who begot the people of Umogidi, or Adoka, or Odi, who begot the people of Yala, Oh, yalla. A Nabatean bronze object has been found in the Wadi Musa near Petra. The inscription mentions a priest and his son and is dedicated to Obodas, the god in Gaia. Gaia was in the mountains east of Petra. So another word associated with Gaia is Zeus, right? And so this was dated in the reign of the last Nabatean king, Rabal, in 70 to 106 AD. Obodas, the ruler of Petra in Edom, took his title from the Edo name. So he was ruling in Edom, and he took his title from the Edo name for ruler, which is Oba. Okay? It appears that the Edo conception of the dignified ruler was found among the Edomites of Petra. This title was used among the Anu. In the history of Japan, Obitos refers to regional rulers. So this title was used among the Anu. So Anunnaki, right? And when we look, so all right, let's just go into some of the genealogy here. The prophet Obadiah was from Edom, according to the Talmud, and was said to have been a friend of the Horite ruler Job. Genesis 36 lists the Horite ruling family of Edom among the two Horite rulers named Esau, as shown in the diagram below. So we have Elon, and then we have Esau mixed with Ada to have Tim Eliphaz, right? Remember, I'm always joking, but I'm not sure. It could be James Elephantis. Elephantis from Comet Pizza, right? Timnah, so these are the people of Mount Seir, the Horites, right? So out of these came Timnah, Lotan, Zebion, Ezer, and Dishan. See, this word Ezer is like a Caesar or a czar or a helper, or not really a helper, right? And so these descendants, right, the mixing of these groups are synonymous, they're saying here, with Esau, Edom. So this is interesting. You know, Herod, who killed all the children in Rome, the Hebrew children around the birth of Yahusha, called himself king of the Jews, because what they first called themselves Jews at the time of Esther, because all of the Edomites were being slain and only the Jews were being given the exception. So they started converting or lying and saying they were Jews, the Edomites. But we see that Bethlehem is in David's hometown of Bethlehem is in the house of Obed-Edom. So you can see Edom was still in the land in those times. So, as I suspected. Here's another piece of information. I found this on this Facebook page, and I've shown you guys this map of the country of Edom before in Africa. But this is interesting here. Edom in West Africa, Edo people of Benin, Part 1, the name. The first major pointer in this direction is the claim by some Edomite groups they are descended from certain of Edom. Of all the tribes in Nigeria today, only Edom trace their ancestry to Edom, according to Aram. Edu was the putative founder and father of different groups in Idoma land. J.H. Breasted claimed that the Edomites, ancient Egyptian root red linen, ruled Egypt for a period of 100 years. Remember I showed you that genealogy, right? The genealogy of, let me see if I can find it. Remember, I showed you this genealogy here before towards Amalek, right? Well, I'm going to show you it again and again. But what we find is that this is what leads to these rulers of Ramses, Seti, Menetpa. All right? So there's a direct link, and a lot of the Edomite warlocks and stuff were the ones that were with Pharaoh when Israel was being tested. Okay? So these came out of Amalek, then Ramses, Setis, Ramses II, Menetpa. Let's keep going. The Encyclopedia Americana puts this period between 1680 and 1580 BC, 1600. This period coincides with what is today identified as the Second Intermediate period in Egyptian history and linked with the 14th dynasty said to have been ruled by the Hyksos. See, now I always thought the Hyksos were the Edomites because they're associated with the cross, and it seems like a Hebrew name. The 16th dynasty said to have been ruled by minor Hyksos, and the 17th dynasty said to have been the era of the Theban overlords. The word for red stuff is, so they have the Hebrew word. I can't really tell what this is. I think it's Aleph, Dalet, and maybe that's a mem. I can't remember. I don't really like that Hebrew. Adam, a word highly similar to the same. Edom, the identical root, is the source for Adam. Another derivation is Adama, meaning field. Thus, Esau is a man of the field. Interesting enough. Of the patron deities of Edo is Isu. The cognate for this name, Edom, amongst the Igbo is Oyo or Odum, and the Fawn people, Da. These are descriptive words for colors of animals found in the bush. Some Edoma groups still have the clear idea of Edu or Esau, right, as their ancestral father. It is very likely that Edu was derived from Edom or Edom, because apart from meaning a type of snake, interesting enough, huh? Edu is a common name among the Edoma-speaking people in Nigeria. The Assyrians called them the Udumi, just as they are identified as Udumala. Idumala. I think that's Idumala. The Assyrians called them, just as they are identified with the Udumama or Adame in Greek and Latin respectively. Egyptologists equate Edom with Seir, okay, Mount Seir, or Aduma itself is a common name borne by men among the Edoma. Okay? So this is part one, the Edom in West Africa, the people of Benin. Interesting, huh? Just a break here, as I've said before, I think the Fulani are the Edomites, and that there is a bit of an identity theft here, just as some of the Ashanti are Edomites, and the male leaders, maybe perhaps, of the Edo tribe today are some of the descendants of the Fulani, of the Edomites, Edom. But I think the Fulani are the true Edomites, and they've just kind of, they've done all these cultural shifts to kind of cover their tracks. So that's why you see this, that's why I showed you first the Edo king and then the two Fulani, all three of them with the queen. But I'm going to skip ahead to like the 1900s, after that period, and the time of Hoover and Marcus Garvey. And we're going to see how this Esau, Jacob, Ishmael dynamic plays out. When discussing the war of the YAHSHARELites against the Confederacy of other nations, you have to talk about Marcus Garvey, because it was at the turn and beginning of the 19th century or the 20th century that he began to try to return Israel back to Africa, back to the Promised Land. But he was very much opposed by the Edomites, by Esau, Edom. And things were redirected because of America's fear of a black Messiah.
John Edgar Hoover. When he joined the Department of Justice in July 1917 at 22 years old, he worked for the Bureau of Investigation, founded in 1908, later changed to the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1935, where he became its head in 1924. And this counter-radical specialist had a pet obsession with Marcus Garvey. It was by monitoring Garvey that he specialized his craft into a surveillance program in the 1960s called COINTELPRO. What was its aim? The FBI file tells us that it was to prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. The man who was born Malcolm Little, later known as Malcolm X, who was under FBI surveillance, grew up in a household where his parents, Louise Little on the left, his mother, and his father, Earl Little on the right, were one of the most zealous Garveyites in the United States. In the first chapter of his autobiography, Malcolm X said when describing his parents, "Louise Little, my mother, was born in Grenada in the British West Indies. My father, the Reverend Earl Little, was from Reynolds, Georgia, a Baptist minister, a dedicated organizer for Marcus Aurelius Garvey's UNIA. With the help of such disciples as my father, Garvey from his headquarters in New York's Harlem was raising the banner of black race purity and exhorting the Negro masses to return to their ancestral African homeland, a cause which had made Garvey the most controversial black man on earth." Malcolm X attended his UNIA meetings with his father. When Martin Luther King Jr. paid a visit to Jamaica, he told them that Marcus Garvey laid the foundation for the civil rights movement. The Black Panther Party was also surveillanced by the FBI under COINTELPRO. One of its co-founders, Huey Newton, in his book To Die for the People, tells us that Panther ideology was built on Marxist-Leninism communism, ideologies that were developed in London, England. The Panther, Eldridge Cleaver, in his book Soul on Ice, mentions that Garvey, who in the first quarter of the century sparked a black mass movement in America, but international in scope and potential. He was also aware of Garvey's influence, but the Black Panther Party was heavily infiltrated by men on the FBI payroll. Fred Hampton was known as the best organizer in the whole of the Black Panther Party. His personal bodyguard was Hugh O'Neill. At the young age of 21, Fred Hampton was gunned down by the Chicago police while he slept in his bed. His bedroom was riddled with bullets on his blood-soaked bed. But how did they know exactly where he slept? All of the details and the layout of his house and where he slept was given to the FBI by Hugh O'Neill, the bodyguard of Fred Hampton. J. Edgar Hoover learned that the most effective way of destroying black leaders is by using black people, for they would never suspect that their own race would be a snitch, and he learned that from monitoring Marcus Garvey, where FBI agents like African-American Thomas Jefferson in 1922 was monitoring Garvey for Hoover, and Earl F. Titus on the left and Arthur Lower Brent on the right worked as undercover agents in the 1920s to sabotage the work of the UNIA.
So notice they have names like Titus and Jefferson. So these are sounding more like Edomitish names because it's Esau and Jacob. They're twins. Huey Pete Newton was one of the people who started the Black Panthers, and he based his approach on communism. It was not a spiritual approach as many other people's had been. And he was eventually exiled to Cuba after all kinds of false charges were trumped up against him. He preferred to work in the community. But he came back and his charges were released, but he was eventually killed in a ghetto. But Assata Shakur had the same fate, but she was tortured by the police. And then she also had to flee to Havana. And even to this day, Barack Obama and Trump still have a warrant out for her arrest, and she is abroad. Meanwhile, people like Angela Davis got to tour around and be a righteous community worker. So there's a lot of curiosity about the fate of these people and a lot of political confusion. You can't really get away with being a true revolutionary by conforming to the system, and those who seem to do that seem to prosper very well, or their offspring seem to prosper very well off of the moniker of activism, which was then co-opted and moved into movements like Black Lives Matter. And of course, the NAACP and other organizations like that, which are run by Ish people, have totally co-opted the civil rights movement to push forward the LGBTQ agenda and use people like Martin Luther King's wife, and even say that Huey P. Newton was pro-LGBTQ, and they like to say to co-opt and use these movements to put forward the agendas of Hasatan. And so, nonetheless, I showed you in one of my last videos on Balenciaga that there was a character in the movie who was basically Black Edom, and he was saying that in the last 300 years, well, Mark Wahlberg's character was saying that he was dissatisfied with how this deal had gone with the devil. And of course, we always see that with the Black elite and movie stars. They seem to really be suffering under their white oppression in Satan's star system. So, the glory of the excellency of the Shemitic Chaldeans who chose to remain Egyptian, and the 10 tribes in the United States. Yah had separated those Chaldeans and Shemites away from Israel as far as the east is from the west. But somehow the 10 tribes wound up back there. And the 10 tribes never, in the independence of their northern kingdom, ever worshipped Yah. The heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can comprehend it? There's been so many things that's held us down. Some speculate that South America, the land of Shem, is actually Atlantis, and that the 7 streams between around the West Indies would be Eden. And Yah decided to hide the sin of Shem from Israel as far as the east is from the west. So when it came to Jamaica, these are some of the other tactics they used on Jamaica in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s. And so Esau, Edom, ruling the world, especially Egypt, South and Central America.
as the Babylonian king, the high priest of hell, the lead eagle Nazi, ruled the world and allied himself with the Khan. So you may have been asking, why are they so fiercely protecting this identity? Why don't they just admit they're African? Well, the truth is that they are indigenous to this land. They've just mixed in a lot with Ham, which is why you even see a lot of the Mexicans and Hamites in the camp groups, because Yah said he would redeem them through Israel. And so you see them in the camps claiming to be Israel, but then you have all these indigenous people, because the land matters. If you're just black or colored, you have no identity. But if you are an indigenous person of a specific land, like the Shemitic lands, you are a citizen of that land and you have all of your Yah-given right. The problem is, YAHSHAREL, this ain't your land, nor is it the Shemitic land, but those who want to stay and be Egypt will be judged for it. We're going to look a little bit at what's going on in Africa now, but first I want you to understand the geography of the land based on when Israel entered into the land, so that we can understand where the land of Israel is and where Edom is ruling and how. Shemini, this is Sinini, Shemini also means 7 in Hebrew. It means 7. So if you're talking about Shemini, 7, if this was Shemini, Nanini, it could mean the seed of the 7 nations was their God. The seed of the 7 nations, the fallen angels, the Rephaim became their gods, and they started worshiping voodoo and everything like that, right? As prophesied according to scripture. First Samuel talks about, then he went also to Ramah and came to the great well that is Shiku, and asked and said, where are Samuel and David? And one said, behold, they be at Naoth Ramah. All right, and so this is Mount Aramah or Ramah. And this is in a part of the Congo, okay, which is a high place. I'm believing this is the only Ramah or close to Aramah, because Ramah would mean Aram or Ram, right, that I can find in this mount, Aramah, right, or Ramah, all of the prophets and the priests and the singers. So it was considered a holy place, a holy place. So there's another mountain called Aramanga in Uganda, which overlooks this whole area where the Congo is and where all the mining is as well, the Rift Valley. So here's a picture of that. It could be either one. So this is Mount Aramaga, but I'm going to guess, I'm going to show it to you, but I'm going to guess that the mountain is further in and they just kind of moved it out a bit to throw us off. But this is the region anyway. So, and this is in the Kibale region, Kibale. So you see they're naming it after B-A-A-L. You see, light of Baal. But we know there is a very high mountain right around here at the True Eye in this region, which is around here, which I showed you on the other map, or in the other video, which is a high place in Africa, a high mountainous region. Because there's this illustration of this rock. Remember that Moshe struck the rock and water came out of the rock, and the mountain of Israel was supposed to have the streams of Gihon, these rivers beneath it. And so that's what's depicted in this image, but it seems to be closer to the mouth part of the face, or South Africa. But I don't know, the orientation is still kind of from a land perspective rather than a top view. And then when we go over to these two top views, we see that, you know, land elevation, yeah, it's lower, but there's a portion up here beyond the eye that seems to be much higher than is shown in the Google Maps and in this other model, which they don't really show. This is equal in elevation to these lands, okay? This part here. So they don't really show that to people on maps. It's all hidden by bushes and everything, but it's not hidden in this particular representation of elevations in Africa from the book. The Earth and Its Inhabitants and the Universal Geography by Elliston Recluse.
So,พี่มาเตือน Ça va, ok. Très bien. Tosha, Tia, très bien. Ça, Tosha.
So I didn't go and watch Wakanda Forever. And a lot of people look at me and say, wait a minute, you're black. You have to go and watch Wakanda Forever. The truth is, I didn't like Black Panther. I did go and see that, but I had a lot of issues with the movie. And I'm going to explain to you why I didn't like it and why I believe it actually, the first film anyway, did more harm than good to black people. Pay attention. When you look at white heroes, they tend to fight the enemy of the West at that given time. So Superman was created in 1933 and his enemy was the Germans, the Nazis. Wonder Woman was also the Nazis. Captain America also fought the Nazis. Iron Man fought a proxy for Al-Qaeda or Islamic terrorists. Now, the X-Men was a little bit different. They were actually an allegory for civil rights, but without the heroes actually being black. Because a lot of people say that Professor X and Magneto were basically Professor X is MLK and Magneto is Malcolm X in that universe. But it was just sort of weird that they used that as a template, but the actual heroes themselves weren't black. Black Panther is supposed to be an African hero, but he wasn't fighting the enemies of Africa. Portuguese slavers, British colonizers, American slavers, Belgians in the Congo, the French in West Africa, the Dutch in South Africa, Western multinational corporations that take our resources for peanuts. Black Panther avoided all the natural enemies of black and African people, and instead Wakandans were fighting each other. Wakanda is meant to be the most technologically advanced country in the world, but instead of helping the impoverished African nations next to them, they hid themselves because they didn't want to have to change their way of life. When Nakia went to save the kidnapped girls, which was an allegory for the kidnapped Nigerian girls, she was reprimanded by Chala. Now, my question is, why are you hiding to help fellow Africans? When Superman or X-Men or any of these other heroes help people, they do it in broad daylight and they act as a deterrent to the bad guys. Basically like, hey, we're here to protect these people, so if you come, you're gonna have to deal with us. But when black people have a hero, they hide. Why exactly isn't Nakia allowed to help Africans openly? Wakanda has medical tech that can cure a spinal injury in 24 hours. Which Shuri does for the CIA agent, that Ross dude. But you guys can't help Africa eradicate typhoid, HIV, sickle cell, yellow fever, and the multitude of other diseases that are killing millions of Africans for the decades that we've been dealing with. You guys have all seen the UNICEF, the Red Cross commercials, and all these things. You're seeing those images being pumped out about black African people, but we have an African hero who his country have this tech, and you're not going to cure those diseases forever? Very, very strange. Wakanda sends spies to America, but when the spy tries to help black people by giving them weapons to fight oppression, the Wakandan king kills him. When the US or UK send spies to Africa, they do it to affect regime change, leverage for resources, and basically give their nation an advantage. Let me give you an example. James Bond. James Bond is a spy. James Bond in every movie goes into all of these countries and all these places, and his basic focus is the Queen, who is not the Queen anymore, obviously it's not the King, but basically the Britain, the UK, and basically working in the interest of protecting the UK. He kills people, for goodness sake. He has a license to kill. That's what 007 means. But when Wakanda have spies, they can't do anything. That's the point of spies. But the Wakandan spies, the black spies, they are supposed to just spy. Killmonger gets created out of this situation, and rightly he hates Wakanda. He's the only character focused solely on black people, and he gets depicted as a murderous terrorist. It's almost like they made him Malcolm X and Shala MLK, then pushed for the Shala pacifist MLK ideology as the preferable option to the proactive ideology of the radical Killmonger. Like, that's basically what I was seeing. The moment Killmonger's butt touched the Wakandan throne, he was riding for black people. And very quickly, he was killed, but not before he gives one of the best speeches you'll ever hear. So anyway, it's worth watching the movie just to see Killmonger's speech before he dies. It's as if they put all the positive ideas of black empowerment into him so they could kill him and thus symbolically kill the ideas that he had, essentially telling black people that this is not how you get ahead. You get ahead by being like Shala. Then, instead of Wakanda giving their tech to African nations, they give it to the UN. Who, as any African who has sense, will tell you what the hell have they done to advance the continent of Africa in the decades they've allegedly been trying to do so? One of the biggest issues with African economies is the debt they owe to those Western nations. Wakanda have the most valuable mineral on earth, vibranium. Why don't they pay off all of Africa's debt with a tiny bit of vibranium and then create a single African currency backed by vibranium, which could go against fiat money, which is what the West uses, which is backed by nothing? They would instantly turn Africa into the greatest empire the world has ever seen overnight. Think about the fact that after you pay your tickets or subscription or whatever the hell you pay to watch this film, which I view as silent pacification, most of that money goes to the very culture that has and is exploiting the African continent and continues to keep them in economic chains. Follow for information on my independent project to create genuine, authentic African heroes.
So Esau initially married in with the Horites and the Canaanites, and then he allied himself with the Shemites and the Moabites and even the Egyptians to finally form the Khan, the American, to form the people of the Khan, who worshipped the serpent, the flying serpent, Awa. But remember, Esau is the end of the world. How are the things of Esau sought out, and his treasures searched? All the men of thy confederacy have driven thee to thy borders. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. And they that ate thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. Shall not I in that day, saith Yahuwah, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding from the mount of Esau, and thy strong men, O Teman? For thy cruelty against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever.
Now, we estimate there's about 100,000 people here. As you can see over there, there's way more people than there was the other day. And there's no running water, there's no electricity, there's nowhere for anybody to really go to the toilet, there's not enough food, etc., etc. And more people are coming every day. So. Hapana piga. Ndio. Vidudu. Hapa.
Mount Zion shall be deliverance. It shall be holy. And the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and a house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau a stubble. And they shall kindle in them, and devour them,
and there shall be no remnant of the house of Esau, for Yahuwah have spoken it. So is there a remnant of Edom? It's written that there is. Here it's written that there isn't. And they shall possess the south side of Mount Esau and the plain of the Philistines, and they shall possess the fields of Ephraim and the fields of Samaria, and Benjamin shall have Gilead, and the captivity of the host of the children of Israel, which were among the Canaanites. The Amorites are Canaanites, Americans are Canaanites, shall possess unto Zarephath, and the captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad, shall possess the cities of the south. And they that shall save shall come up Mount Zion to judge the Mount of Esau, and the kingdom shall be Yahuwah's. What did we learn? We learned that this confederacy of Shemites were usually a mixture of sometimes Midian, Moab, the Assyrians, the Chaldeans, aka the Edomites. They were a mixed multitude in the tradition of Babylonianism, which is confusion by mixing. And according to the book of Numbers and the Targum, when Israel returned to their land, the first ones they fought with were the Canaanites, and the Canaanites are also part of that confederacy. Okay, and so they had to defeat Amalek. They had to defeat the Canaanites. All right, so Esau, Edom, and the Canaanites and the Horites. And we learned about this confederacy, that they function that way even then. So it's nothing new under the sun, and Egypt and Babylon are always about confusion by mixing. All right, so, and we also saw that there are lands on the west coast of Africa that are duplicated on the east coast of South and Central America. The people groups also, and the lions are also everywhere. And we saw that, Esau Edom is, once again, he is the Black Panther, and that he did a bad deal with the devil. And so he's been trying to get his power back ever since, but according to scripture, he will be defeated. We also learned about how Jamaica was economically defeated by the forces of communism, getting in the midst of the forces of communism and capitalism there in the center of the earth. All right, and we saw that even the Black Panthers were quite a mixed bag. And we saw how agents of Esau Edom penetrated the forces of Black revolutionaries, or perhaps even began them, or were definitely a part of them during the 1960s. And we saw how Benin was actually an Edomite empire that was responsible for the slave trade, and has possibly now is the Fulani rather than necessarily those who call themselves the Edom now, who look very much like the people in Israel today. And so, and we also learned that Israel and the 10 tribes, all 12 tribes, understood when they arrived here that they came from afar. That included Montezuma, that included the Huguenots, and the 10 tribes who came from Britain and Spain. They understood that they were not from here, as the Moors did. Okay, and the Moors had their own agreements with America, their own contracts and agreements, which we'll go into in the next episode. And we saw again and again words like Suriname for Assyria being used right in South America. And we also saw Seminole Indian, and that one of the Chata tribe is related to one of the Assyrian tribes, one of the groups relocated by the Assyrians to occupy YAHSHARELite land. And so once again, it's the doctrine of confusion by mixing, which is an Egyptian Babylonian way of mixing. And we saw
that the birds, the feathered bird is always the symbol of the fowls of the air who feast and feed on the nation of Israel while in their captivity. And that is a symbol of Egypt and Edom. YAHSHAREL, don't let them deprive you of your blessing. Don't let them rob you of your inheritance. And for any of those of the tribes of Shem and all of the other ones I've listed today, receive Yahusha and be saved. Do not take Babylon as your home or take these deals, because it's going to be destroyed. And that's obvious to everybody. Whoever is trying to lead you to claim this land, it's going to be destroyed. Return every man to your own land is the command from Jubilees 10. Because if you're found outside of your land, you will be under a curse. Shalom, family. And all right, so I have a part 3 coming hopefully this week or by Friday or next first day. Family, hallelujah. May Yah bless you and keep you and cause his face to shine on you. May he be gracious, lift the light of his countenance, and give you peace. Subah Yahuwah Rev Alep YAHSHAREL. And we just thank you for the music of our brother Elliston Stone. And I would ask you also, family, that
to the Most High Yahuwah, and giving thanks and praises for many blessings.
Please go ahead and pick up Into All Truth, Moabite Appointed Times Calendar, or Chaya Eat Life and Fast to absorb the appointed times and also to support this ministry. You know that tithing is a command. I never ask for a whole tithe, but I do appreciate your support, and you have no idea how much it means to me, so I really thank you for it.
May all of YAHSHAREL, Yisrael, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh, give him thanks by saying hallelujah.